When the classic Mega Man X came out in 1993, it received a great reception from fans and critics alike. Over a decade later, it got a reboot on the PlayStation Portable. Here is my review on Mega Man Maverick Hunter X. The game came out in 2005 in Japan and 2006 everywhere else. When the game came out, the X series was in a strange spot. We just had X8, which, as much as I liked that game, it had its issues, and Capcom was not doing the best when it comes to its sales and overall marketing towards the series. Now, the marketing thing can be up for debate, which is fair. I personally think it was more of series burnout at the time. Look at it like this. Since the first game in 1993, it had 7 sequels and 3 spin-offs in the span of 12/13 years, so yeah, I think it's fair to say that series burnout could be a factor in all this. And by the way, that doesn't even include the Zero games, which even though that's its own thing, it did kind of spawn from the X games. There are other series that came out as well, but that list would be way too much to mention here. But let's just say from 2000 to 2010, there were a ton of Mega Man games, and looking at it now, it kind of hurt the franchise. Burnout from a franchise is not good, so when sales for the X games were going down, Capcom gave the X series a reboot starting with the first one. That is the history of the game, so let's get into the game itself. The story of the game is what you'd expect it to be from the original. Mega Man X is a Maverick Hunter and he's defending the Reploids in the area that the game takes place. Good news is, it's not just X that has to do this. Various others defend Reploids, including Zero, who is X's best friend. Both X and Zero have to take out their former commander Sigma, who defected to become a Maverick and has caused a bunch of destruction and chaos to the area. The game starts with X on a broken highway, and it's a nice introductory stage as you learn the basic gameplay. At the end of the stage, you fight Sigma's underling Vile, who takes you down and is about to deal the final hit. However, before this happens, Zero comes in to save you, and it's a nice scene, implying that something bad happened before the events of the game.
Zero! Thanks. You saved me again.
After this, you are in the stage select screen, and you take out the 8 Maverick bosses to move on to Sigma's fortress. It carries the same formula as most Mega Man games, and it works. It is simple, but it works, and as a little bonus, they actually let you replay the highway level, which is interesting. That is the story of the game. The type of game is an action platform where you run and jump throughout, as all the others are, and it runs pretty good. The difficulty in the game is decent for the most part, but just like the original, the curve is mainly at the final boss, which is tough once again, but it's almost easier this time. This is subjective, but I actually enjoyed this game's final fight more since it was a little easier. And just like before, even when fully powered, it can still give a lot of problems. When it comes to the gameplay itself, it has a nice balance of running and gunning, especially with the upgrades you get throughout. With X, you get 4 armor upgrades that you can find in stages. Some are in hidden spots, so you may have to look at even little spots that you normally wouldn't think to look at. The speed dash, which is the leg upgrade, is important for beating the game as you go around levels fast. But more importantly, use this for jumps and also to avoid enemy attacks. The helmet upgrade lets you destroy walls in order to get items or even other upgrades. It's worth noting in this game that the leg upgrade can take out a few walls as well, so those two have that in common. The Buster upgrade lets you do an extra charge blast, which does more damage and looks cool. It also lets you charge special attacks for more attacks with them. Something which I didn't know for a long time is that there is another Buster upgrade which you can get that actually does a little bit more damage than this one. Unlocking this one though requires a special event to take place, and when you get to the event, you cannot have the arm part from the capsule, so that's a thing to remember. Lastly, the body upgrade lets you take reduced damage from enemies, which is good for later parts in the game. Oh, and yes, I will mention it here, there is a secret upgrade that you can get, which is the Hadouken from Street Fighter. It's great as you can one-shot anything as long as you are full health. The input is the same from Street Fighter as well, so nice little thing they added here. Once all the parts are collected, you complete the armor, which is known as the First/Light Armor. Fitting, considering the parts are left by Dr. Light. Most of these upgrades require other upgrades in order to get them, but once you have them, you get that feeling of being strong. Other things you can get in the game are heart tanks and sub-tanks. The heart tanks are used for extending your health, and the sub-tanks are used for storing health and using it later. Keep in mind that those only work if you pick up health while being at full health. The heart tanks are in every level, whereas the sub-tanks are only in 4 levels. Some of these do require special weapons to obtain. Now, since this is a reboot/remake, there were some changes made to the item collection. The most famous one arguably being the speed boost, where instead of getting it in Chill Penguin stage, it is in Flame Mammoth stage. Don't worry, the jump to the upgrade is better this time though. With the speed boost in Flame Mammoth stage, this means other upgrades are in different stages, so this is a thing to keep in mind, because it can definitely throw you off the first time. The other items in the game are in the same spots, so if you play the original, it'll be easy to get these. One unique gameplay mechanic that the game has is the environment plays a role when going through stages. This means if you do certain stages first before doing other ones, the area will change either for the good or bad. For example, when you beat Chill Penguin stage, Flame Mammoth stage becomes frozen and makes it easier to go through. However, when you beat Storm Eagle, his ship crashes through Spark Mandrill's area, which causes the lights to go on and off. This one is better but also worse at the same time, because whenever the lights are off, you can't see much. Doesn't help that Spark Managel stage has a few pits where if you fall, you have to restart at the checkpoint. This mechanic is honestly pretty cool, and even the original had this, which at the time was such an interesting thing to have. It may not seem like much, but this subtle thing helps with a little bit of world building, especially since there is a ton of variety with the stages themselves. We have lava factories, a ship, a mining facility with a fun speed kart section, and of course, there are more environments, but to me, it shows that they didn't want each stage to feel similar to each other. Instead, having something in each stage which makes it more memorable, whether it be a gimmick or just the location itself. Let's get into the bosses. The bosses play a massive role in the games, and here it's no different, but just like many other features, the bosses have also had a few things mixed up, more in a good way though. Most if not all have new moves which help for variety. Any new players who get into this after playing the original will for sure notice these moves. When you encounter them, they actually talk to you before fighting. Keep in mind that we never saw much personality in the bosses with only a few exceptions, Magma Dragoon from Mega Man X4 arguably being the most notable. Here we get to see all the bosses talk, and this leads into the voice acting, which given the track record of previous games, the voice acting is good, though there are a few that almost enter the range of memes.
Sigma must be as crazy as you say.
Again, almost. The real highlight for me is X himself, who maybe for the first time in the series I can say I really like his dialogue. Granted, me personally, I actually liked him in X8, but here he is pretty good. All of this is great, and if the game was just this, it would have been fine, but the devs decided that there should be a second playable character in the game. Surprisingly, they went with a left field choice for the character, this being Vile. Fun fact, apparently Zero was actually going to be the other playable character, but they didn't want to make it super obvious, so instead, we get Vile. The way you unlock Vile is by beating the game with X, and once that happens, you get to play as him, and I am honestly amazed at what they try to do with him, both from a story and a gameplay perspective. He has his own route in the game, which is a little bit foreshadowed in the intro. Here he has a different attitude towards Sigma and is not exactly a big fan of him. This doesn't mean he's on the good side though. Vile has his own plan for world domination, which as cliche as it sounds, he tries. I actually like his route, though when I first played it, it felt way different than what I was expecting, which I want to say is what the devs' plan was probably. Vile plays different from X, where he has 3 types of attacks: his shoulder launcher, his arm attacks, and the leg attacks. There are a ton of different moves that you learn whenever you beat bosses, and you get to mix and match them as long as you're within the threshold that he can handle. As you progress throughout the game, you have more space, so that is a nice feature. A lot of these moves are pretty cool, and they vary a lot from each other. A good example is the leg attacks, where one can be launching grenades. Nothing crazy here, but you can also do a flame attack that's close range but strong. It just shows the levels that you can mix and match with for his attacks. Just like with X, some weapons can be bosses' weaknesses, so the formula there is the same. Something which is a little different though is that he doesn't get any upgrades like how X does with the light capsules. Instead, his upgrades are obtained after beating bosses. When you beat Chill Penguin, you get Frozen Castle, which is essentially the armor upgrade where damage is reduced by half. So getting it at the start is pretty good, all things considered. The only issue though is that the levels are changed in small ways, which can make it tough for early game Vile. Since Vile cannot dash, you have to rely on running and jumping. Even when you get the increased speed, you only go somewhat faster, which is good for going through levels, but might give some trouble at first. Another change with Vile's route is the item collecting, where they move some of the items to other locations. And this threw me off, as items are of course an important part of the game, but them being in other spots can be tough to remember when going from an X run to a Vile run. Other than that, Vile's route does have new cutscenes throughout and a few exclusive boss fights only to him, like in the intro when you face X. Though I have to comment on this, some of his dialogue is very like something else, and that can either be in a good way or a bad way.
XXX. Why does everyone like that guy?
I mean, he is very angry when you go through his route, so be prepared is all I can say. Honestly, as tough as it can be, Vile's route is pretty nice as it's something different. I am a big fan of Zero, but not having him playable in the end is honestly fine since they try to do something different. Before we get to the general changes with other stuff, I want to talk about the music here. A lot of themes in this I adore. The remixes are nice to hear, and even though it's subjective, I believe that for what it is, the music fits well for it being a reboot. Even Vile's themes are good. Though I have to say, when playing through one of the 8 stages as him, you hear the same theme throughout when exploring, so sadly you won't hear the actual stage theme. Outside of that, I love many of the tracks here, but my favorites are the first stage select theme and the weapon get theme. Funny thing is, both of these were on different ends of the spectrum for me before in the original. I love the original stage select theme, but would always forget the weapon get theme. Here, the weapon get theme is one of my faves as mentioned, so that's a bonus. For me, the music is great in this reboot. Let's get into other changes and some overall stuff that the reboot did different. The story regarding X's backstory is a little different here in some minor ways, where he was discovered by Dr. Kane many years ago instead of months. Dr. Kane himself doesn't have much to do with this timeline, as the Day of Sigma short shows that, well, he isn't around for that long, let's just say. Even though this is actually not confirmed, which is strange. Another thing to add to X's backstory in this timeline is Dr. Light's reasons for sealing him away. Beforehand, he was sealed away for testing his moral integrity due to it being necessary to see if X takes the best decisions when he enters the world. Now here, in this timeline, Dr. Light already knows X is a good guy but believes that people are not ready for him. I mean, this may not seem like much at all, but then again, it is the setup of the series and changing it up here doesn't really change that much. I mean, really, the biggest change for me is what they did with Dr. Kane, which is notable since he appeared in X2 and X3. But overall, it's not a big deal either. It's okay that these changes were made, though it doesn't seem to affect that much. Something which I like more is how Sigma is portrayed this time. He is of course a bad guy, but he really just doesn't care about having friends minus his companion. He does show a little bit of concern for Vile at one point, but that's more in his route, and there's a little bit of strange continuity there, so that's kind of its own thing. What I think really helps Sigma, however, and this applies to everyone else as mentioned earlier, is the voice acting. Sigma does sound menacing and the type of villain that you want to take down at all costs, because, well, the damage is already done and he plans to do more. Speaking of which, this is a good time to mention the Day of Sigma short. With Mega Man Maverick Hunter X, you can watch the Day of Sigma, which shows the events literally days before the game starts. For it being only 25 minutes, it's surprisingly good as it shows the dynamics of the Maverick Hunters and how they put the pieces together that something is wrong. It also shows how other characters are before defecting and joining Sigma. It's some nice stuff here. Let's get into a few minor changes I want to mention before we get into the rest of the behind the scenes. I like the interactions X has with the bosses. Again, they are all voiced now, but hearing them have more personality is a plus, and it makes me wonder how other bosses in the series would have been. Also, I really like the navigator that they brought in. Sure, she doesn't have much at all in the story, but it does add a tiny bit more, which is nice. Although she doesn't have a name for some reason. A feature that the original did not have, which is here, is hard mode. All I gotta say on this feature is good luck, cause oh boy. The fact that now when you play the intro stage there is a legit boss fight that you have to do instead of it being a supposed to lose fight is a change that I enjoy, though playing as X against Vile can be tough. After all this, the question remains of why did this get a reboot? Well, believe it or not, the entire X series was actually going to be rebooted for a new audience, and this stunned me when I found out. Why did the series not continue under this timeline? Well, this got discontinued due to the poor sales of Maverick Hunter X. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, I do wonder what changes would have taken place in the later games, mainly 5 and 6. Also, I wonder how a rebooted 7 would be, because as one who doesn't like X7, maybe under the rebooted universe it would have been better? Maybe on a voice acting front at least, but who knows. At this point, it doesn't seem like a rebooted universe will even happen now, but at the end of the day, I think it's okay. It's a shame, but at the same time, it's a risk trying again with a reboot universe, so I think it's safe to say that we most likely won't go back to this universe. As far as this game, however, I can 100% say that it was a fun time and a good reboot to the X series. It has its moments, its charms, and is well worth giving a shot overall. Just wanted to say thank you all for watching the review. This was a real treat to go through, if I'm being honest here. If you want to see more reviews / discussions on games past and present, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want updates on when new videos are coming out, follow them socials. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.